Americans are concerned about inflation and the possibility of a recession as the economy remains the top issue for voters. These are among the results of a new DDHQ poll out this morning. The poll also has new numbers on President Trump's approval, views on student protesters, and UFOs. To break it down, we bring in Director of Data Science for Decision Desk HQ, Scott Tranter. Scott, thanks for coming on. So in your new poll, 91% of respondents, we see it right here on economic concerns, 91% concerned about inflation, 82% recession, 71% concerned about the stock market. These are pretty high numbers and obviously include a good number of Trump voters.
Yeah, you don't get to 91, 82, 71 without being a bipartisan issue. I think take this all into context. The context is each one of these hits on how much someone pays for milk, whether or not they're going on that summer vacation, and how their 401k is doing. That's basically what's on people's minds. The one thing that shouldn't be surprising is as long as we've been polling for NewsNation and The Hill the last 2 years, some version of the economy, whether it be inflation, jobs, some of that has always been a #1 issue. So this is just a continuation of what the election was on last year.
And the economy is usually an issue that Trump does pretty well in, but according to this poll, 56% of voters disapprove of the job that Trump is doing, 44% approve. Do you think it is the economy that's weighing those numbers down?
It certainly is. When we break into the poll, and you obviously go check it out online, you look at some of the crosstabs, the economy is the #1 issue. Tariffs have obviously been the thing we've been talking about the last few weeks. These approval polls that you see, they're reflection of what people are consuming right then and there. They are a snapshot of time. Immigration, an issue that was a top 3 issue for Donald Trump. He's obviously been doing a lot of things on that. Some mixed views on those types of things. But yeah, what we're seeing here is the approval, disapproval reaction largely to the economy.
And we were just showing the numbers as it relates to what people actually expected. It seems like people think, as it pertains to the economy, Trump is doing worse than expected. Is that what you're seeing in that poll? Is that maybe voters are a little bit surprised by the job that Trump's doing?
Yeah, again, it's a reaction. Obviously, the stock market, there's a lot of people we saw in there, 91% worried about inflation, so they're worried about how much things cost. And again, to Trump's credit, egg prices have come down, things like that, but everyone's worried about, is my car going to be 10% more? Is the clothing I'm going to buy going to be 15% more? What is the cost of a computer? Can I go on a vacation? We've started to see some of those things seeping into some of the polls and focus groups we've seen.
And what's happening with their 401ks.
Yeah.
One of the more surprising results that you noted, 64% said that participating in a protest, even one that involved civil disobedience, should not be grounds for canceling a visa. You know, there have been some figures, influential figures, on the right that have been very critical of the Trump administration over this issue. Do you think this survey shows that there's broad disapproval of the Trump administration's handling of that issue?
So broad disapproval, I think there are people who wish it were different, right? And that's kind of how I look at it. Look, America was founded on a version of civil disobedience that went into a revolutionary war, so that's kind of ingrained in our DNA. And so I think a lot of people have the opinion, if these folks have an opinion that differs from mine, we should let them speak it. Where civil disobedience probably crosses into something else is when you violence, destruction of property, and I think that's where the definition comes into play. But I think by and large Americans want to give some of these students the benefit of the doubt, but I imagine that line gets real quickly once they start committing some crimes.
All right, last issue I wanted to talk to you about before I let you go. 44% of voters believe the government is hiding information about the existence of UFOs. You know, conspiracies about aliens and the government covering that up is nothing new, but I wonder, you know, are these numbers higher than what we've seen in the past? Is the number of people that think the government's hiding something growing?
So count me as part of the 44, right? And I think, look, from a zeitgeist of America, Americans are more distrustful or more weary of their government. They're more weary of media today. So I think that's what you're seeing here is everyone's like, I think there's something I don't know. What is interesting to me is 44. If you would have asked me before this question, I would have thought it had been in the 20s and 30s. So 44 is certainly higher than I thought. It's not above 50 yet. And as you see, they're 28% uninsured. But this is something we're going to look at, especially when you've got some of the congressmen out there having these things about RFK files, JFK files, Epstein files, all those types of things. That's what this is playing into. And no, it doesn't surprise me. We'll see if it gets higher, though.
Yeah, definitely been a huge part of the news. It'll be interesting to see what else comes out in the coming months and how that affects those numbers. For now, we'll leave it at that. Scott Tranter, thanks so much for your time and insight.
Thanks for having me.